States. It's lovely to meet all of you. Sorry for keeping you waiting, but I promise I'll make up for it. I wanted to thank Amanda for that lovely introduction, but also to thank Pamela, with whom I've been corresponding for about 1.5 years, and of course everybody at Etruscan Press, especially because they had faith in my collection, and of course they took the risk of publishing, and I know that that's not easy in this particular climate. Big thank you to Phil Brady also. So I start straight away. If you've got the book, it's the very first poem. There's no page number. The poem is in italics because it's a kind of proem. That means a kind of prologue to the rest of the collection, I think, because poetry, I believe, is a way of exercising the act of compassion, isn't it? So very often we do that by looking at otherness. And sometimes the difficulty is that we try to represent otherness objectively, right? But what I'm trying to do through language is to allow myself to be visited by otherness. And of course, that's difficult to achieve. And in a way, it's an impossible task, but it's what I attempt to do all the time. That otherness can take the shape of a rock, tree, a leaf, a bird, another human being in another reality, another time. So this is it. And so it was. We were Zareb the elephant, buffeting a canvas ball the size of a watermelon. One of his hind legs was tied to a chain that chimed whenever the old creature pushed a ball with its trunk. We could not leave. There was something terrible about the elephant's loneliness. It clung to him like moss, growing on his skin, sullying his ivory. The eyes had been broken into so many times, they could no longer see anything but the ball. All day long we watched as if suspended, and minutes grew on us without warning, until we were elephants too, a mass of stone tethered to our bellies, and our ears flapping gravely to the beat of human voices. The next poem I'd like to read makes use of ekphrases, and I find ekphrases to be an interesting exercise in also allowing the other to visit you. I remember in this case, I'm reading the poem on page 21. In this case, I was with a group of other artists, and we'd been to a museum in Alicante, and there were a lot of Roman artifacts. But the one that struck me the most, perhaps, was the least noticeable one. It was just a little plaque with the name of a Roman woman, which I'll be reading. And I just wondered about her life and what it would have been like to be a woman at the time. For those of you who know my work, I can't help writing about mortality, but I also can't help writing about femininity, how it is constructed and how it is resisted. So this is it. My ears, antlers carved from light, tomb of a Roman woman, first half of 300 AD. I hear sobbing, the scrape of a spade, the long cry of a chuff. Lace-plated, wrapped in ivory, my black hair grows into wisps. I taste soil in my mouth, lapis lazuli, then the thud of a stone. They are laying me down. Lapis manalis will close eyes, lips, those softer parts which would not yield to a husband's hands, but spat a child's head, then another and another. As they lay me down, they are chanting my name. May earth be mild to you, in terra erythmitis, Phoconia, Macedonia. Let no man visit me in the afterlife, neither my father nor my father's father. I will not rise into the flight of a negrite, nor will horrors guard me against evil. If life has dealt me its scorpion blade, only death can leave me light. While I was putting together this collection, I noticed that there were so many tree poems, because that's what happens when you're writing. You don't realize what subjects you keep returning to. In this particular poem, it's on page 23, A Killing Corazon de Madeira. I was in the little village of Armila. There were only 300 people in this village. It's an island in the San Blas area of Panama. And I remember our last day there, I was with a group of artists, and there was the Sila, or the spiritual director, who gave us all a branch that had been beautifully carved. I wanted to show it to you. This is the one I got. They were all different from each other. And he explained to us how the natives, the Kuna people, or the Guna people as they are known, would never actually cut the trunk where the heart of the wood would reside, but they would cut branches and then pray on them and ask them for their healing and spiritual powers. So he was gifting this to us, and we were very touched by it. A Killing, Corazón de Madera, Rio Negro, Armila. The medicine man said, awaken the wood with breath, with fire. The spirit of the tree dwells in each branch. But we heard a trickle in the foliage, gluttonous river bearing traces of wave, of tide, Rio Negro rooted in tree's trunk. Ibe, Igua, Irsu, Naba, Naki, Asiswar. We grasped the machete as if it were part of our longing. Fearing caimans, nameless birds dressed in night's electric blue. He said, never sever the trunk. So we chopped it down. Tree had traces of mud, salt sown from the Pacific. Igua, Ila, Nispero, Naki. We grasped the machete as if it were part of our longing. Ibe, Ila, Ila, Sodga, Asiswa. A clean, unwavering cut. Those were words in the Guna language, but I transcribed them phonetically because I didn't actually have access to the real words. So I apologize to whoever understands the language if they are imprecise. I wanted to give you more of an impression of what it was like to be on the island of Armila. One of the things that really struck me there was that there were no mirrors and no glass at all. So, for example, there would be beautiful carvings on the windows and the doors. You'd find turtles and pumas and monkeys, but you could put your hand through them. And even if you went to the hairdresser, for instance, I used to, I thought it was so funny that everybody had to rely on others' view of them because they had no mirrors. But what I was getting at in the next poem I'm going to read, Seven Women in an Thatched Roof Hut, is another kind of sensation. I wanted to say that one of those seven women, was a very gifted artist called Sarah Cunningham. She used to make these beautiful watercolors of the jungle, and unfortunately she passed away unexpectedly last March. So I wanted to dedicate this poem to her memory. Perhaps sometimes you realize that poems always know more than you do. Seven women in a thatched roofed hut, Armila village. We cannot go, our feet heavy, electric, toes stabbing the dirt floor, eyelids swollen with fever. Night tears us apart, its stars too close to be born, and the moon invisible, until the day we emerge from the river, carrying traces of our previous lives. The thatched roof mutes our cries, vomiting and weak in each other's arms, then walking to the doctor's clinic, ticking inside us intravenous strips, or the thud of a coconut splitting open as it hits the ground. Back home, we sleepwalk inside the locked hut, toes grind, sky blue varnish peeling off our nails. Someone is weeping. Someone sits at a checkered window, eyeing dark men in army camouflage. Another sinks into the arms of a hammock. Soot gathers in the folds of our bedclothes. We've had too much ginger wine. Someone is streaming the ocean breath, the frog's frenetic mating. Inside us, the moon is conceiving strange shapes, a primordial beat, a toddler carrying milk in a plastic cup. And all this time, we've been rummaging through ourselves in the dark, our body's engine almost stalling, wanting to walk somewhere beyond the village, the dirt relentless, settling inside us. And for those of you who know me well, I used to be a pianist for many years. For 24 years of my life, I used to play for hours every day. Unfortunately, I don't now, but I believe that music is essential to my poetry. I'm very interested in meter and rhythm and beat. And sometimes I wonder whether for me, in fact, the musicality of the poem is more important than the actual meaning of the words. This particular poem, Speak to Me, on page 46, um, I was trying to use dactylic hexameters for the first time. For those of you that don't know the dactyl, it's a beautiful beat. There would be 3 syllables per foot, and they would go ta-ta, ta-ta. And of course, it's a hexameter, so it happens 6 times here. And my inspiration was one of my favorite writers, Thomas Hardy. You might all remember the poem The Voice, which he wrote for his wife when she had passed away. So I borrow some of his words, and I want to acknowledge him. The poem starts, "Woman much missed, have you called to me, saying that now you are not as you were when you had changed from the one that was all to me, but as at first when our day was fair." But instead, I wanted to use those words to talk about friendship. One of my best friends when I was studying for a master's in creative writing in the UK was a Greek girl called Christina Chatsikazi. And unfortunately, she passed away. But she always wanted me to write about her, to dedicate a poem to her, and I never managed to do so. I'm sorry that now it had to take the form of an elegy. You will realize that after I read the main text, I'll be reading erasures of my own text in my attempt to try to find the archaeology of the language, to dig deep and perhaps to find what the text wants to tell me about life and death, and perhaps the afterlife. Speak to me. For Christina, Athens, 31st December 2006. Little voice, speak, but not here where crosses aren't for suicides. Sharply speak, as you did that last time when you said you were done with him. Woman much missed, leap out of the bath before slitting your wrists. Death was a tear in a cloud, its entrails wreath and chrysanthemum. Rise like the mist beyond caves Paleolithic, slashing white stone, claiming the air. Now shake away fears like raindrops and call to me, goddess in flight, your season of madness gone. No longer dying, but coming. On campus and public latrines, his lust your command. Porny he called you, harlot, putana. This is the heart he took, the tongue as far as the larynx. Later he ditched you, sex as ash. But who could have warned you? No longer coming, dying. You were brief as a dragonfly. Here is ocean, the copper silicate of life as you craved it, sweet rot of your hair. Body still grazed like the stones that skimmed it. Say lacre out. Have you not seen in the faltering light some sign of mystery, rapture, delight? This verse your bold reach, despite line of your heart. Sing then, little voice, sing. Come back a stonecrop, snapdragon, dog-headed and fierce, or acanthus, bear's breeches, hooded and wild, body awakened to change, each wrecked a scatter of sun. Heart briefly seen, hooded sun. Speak this line as body awake. Rise, Putana, come, brief dragonfly. Woman, goddess, harlot, sing, sing. Slit entrails, slash public tongue. Ditch sex, dragon and bear. Mad coming, last verse, come back as. And to switch to another tone, I'll read a very brief prose poem. I've been told that I write very good revenge poems. Don't know whether that's true, but I hope it is, because you definitely can't take revenge in real life. So this is it. The Fisherwoman's Revenge, page 54. He led 6 lives, each a different shade of crimson. Every night, she'd dream of slicing through his ponytail, not as one cuts hair or a beard, but as a fisherwoman slips a knife through a fish's guts, the intestines, dank seaweed. Love, he muttered in his sleep. She prepared to extract it from his mouth. The filaments shone in the near light, a tangled mass of sea green. So, as Amanda said, one of my main sources of inspiration is, in fact, land, space, landscape. I used to write a lot about the sea, of course, being surrounded by the Mediterranean Sea. I'm in love with it. But recently, I've developed a fascination, perhaps even an obsession, with desert landscapes. And I want to read a poem about the Atacama Desert in Chile. I was there in 2018, and I went there again in 2023 because I'm still wanting to write more about it. It is a spectacular desert because it's very high altitude and it's the driest desert in the world, and therefore it has a particular effect on the body. This poem, page 59, Sonata Valle de Marte, it actually means valley, Mars Valley, right? Another name for it is Death Valley, so it's self-explanatory, but it does have a lunar landscape. And I remember going to this place on an extremely windy day. I was trudging uphill against the wind. There was sand blowing everywhere in my hair, my eyes, my mouth. I had to cover myself with a scarf. But the experience was utterly exhilarating. So I was trying to capture that moment. I also wanted to explain a little reference in the second part of the poem. It refers to a Belgian missionary called Father Gustavo Lepage, and he was a very important man because he took an interest in prehistoric Atacama culture or Licanantay culture. He found a lot of artifacts there, bones, ceramics, stone, textiles, and even nowadays you can visit them in the museum if you go to the capital of San Pedro de Atacama. So this is it. Sonata, Valle de Marte, Desierto de Atacama. A stench. Wind like hot rain, whipping sand in your mouth. You're a volcano, a copper mountain sprouting from the rock face. Skin coated in tourmaline, heart racing backwards into a big bang, bacteria exploding over the surface of a lake. No days and no nights, but this blistered surface, the trickle of sand solidifying, your womb birthing a stone. Panorama. The wind tatters the tin house at the top of Valle de Marte. You think of the Belgian missionary walking breathlessly to the throat of the valley, quizzing his God. What was it like for him to believe in creation when dust Catherine wheeled into smoke? Rocks grew pitted and glazed, bearing salt crystals that cracked in the cooling sun. Descent. A stone is more than a stone. There's salt in our mouths as we kiss. We're as lonely as the bird, as the dogs in San Pedro, meekly lifting our snouts to be patted. A beetle scrambles down the dune in the hot, hot sun, the hot wind. Perhaps time is a beetle caught belly up, rolling off a cliff. And I'd like to read a prose poem in 3 sections, also about the Atacama Desert. It's called Tropic of Capricorn, page 74. I was there with a group of artists the first time, and we used to rent 4x4s and go visit special sites. And I remember being on the motorway and being struck by a sign that said Tropic of Capricorn. It was such a vast landscape, some brown and oranges and yellows, but you could see nothing except the sand and the volcanoes and a few guanacos scattered here and there. Then I noticed that there were crosses on the roadside, and they were quite frequent, and I asked about them because next to the crosses there were also the shattered carcasses of trucks and cars, and they told me that they were called animitas, literally meaning little souls. They were memorials for all those drivers who had died tragically on the roadside, because the roads in the Atacama are so long, interminable, and they look the same. It's easy to fall asleep or to get distracted, unfortunately. So it was a very special landscape, also because last year I discovered it was also the route that was taken by the Incas when they were traveling on foot. Yes, it's incredible how they traveled the desert on foot for many days, going all the way up to Lulalaico, which is a dormant volcano between Argentina and Chile. And there they offered sacrifices. In fact, the remains of 3 mummified children have been found. It's possible to find very perfectly preserved mummies there because of the altitude and also because of the dryness. In fact, the dryness really makes you suffer. Your nose bleeds, your skin feels really harsh, like sandpaper. And in the poem, I also refer to altitude sickness as puna, which is what they call it. So, Tropic of Capricorn, Ruta del Desierto, Chile, dying sun. By the roadside, animitas for the dead. A red truck, crushed bonnet intact, dashboard dust, the remains of human hair. Atacameños picnic on the highway to feed the departed. Coca leaves, chañar, rica, water from the salt lakes. Then one last journey towards that southernmost point where the dead meet sun unaccompanied. Even now, when there are 13 of us, we're always traveling alone. 3 4-wheelers daring the dirt road, this unreal replication of a film about a desert. The road empty, save its dull orange hues, guanacos scattered round yellow bushes, the speckless blue of the sky, dunes threatening to devour us. Moonscaped. Airs heavy and dry, clotting our nostrils, our eyes pink, grainy, half open to unfamiliar darknesses where stars wing their reds and greens, and the black spaces between the brightest points unspool the same note. How we're bound to crash into the thickest air, heavy-headed, our last trajectory, the Antarctic, like partygoers, gathered in throngs, intoxicated, wandering into a lunar landscape, alone, spirits floating, laden with dust, with wind, with the memory of their own burial. Across. We want words for this blankness, where the body lags behind its shadow, our consciousness remote and animal-souled. Even when there's water, we carry our knees wherever we go. The salt lagoons set their eyes on us, sharp turquoise, aqua. Rivers struggle in the valleys between would-be orchards filled with figs, pomegranates, trees we cannot name. We're merely replicas of ourselves, molded into stone sculptures. Our voices flatten and die. The pampas are swelling with weed, but we're barely breathing. Each huff a step towards that invisible border. The dreaded puna tugs at our lungs, and all's gone, but one red truck by the roadside. This lone fox nudging our bones. And sometimes one must travel far away from home in order to write about home, especially if you're interested in writing about something that feels very raw to you and you need some kind of distancing effects, right? And for some time, I wanted to write about Daphne Caruana Galizia, who was a Maltese journalist that was brutally assassinated on the 16th of October 2017. For those who don't know, Daphne had a formidable voice. She had a merciless pen. She had a blog that most of the Maltese population used to follow, whether they admitted it or not. But she was a brilliant investigative journalist, and she unveiled corruption at the highest levels of Maltese society. And of course, that's why she was assassinated. So I traveled to Iceland at the end of 2019, the beginning of 2020, just before COVID, I remember. And I had the intention of writing about the Aurora Borealis. It should have been the optimal time to see it. Only 4.5 hours of daylight. I was there for 2 weeks, never saw it. But instead, I had some other insights into the story, and they came across in 3 different locations. One of them was in the village where I was staying in Olafsfjordur. My pronunciation, excuse me, might not be precise. Another one was at a cliff edge where I saw the skeleton of a sheep. And another one was in a beautiful natural history museum, just a few paces from where I was staying. There was an exhibition on Icelandic birds and also about human history of flight, I remember. But what interested me was a reference to ravens. So I used that reference for the end of my poem. This is a poem that in fact makes a lot of references, including a quotation from Daphne Caruana Galizia's blog in the second section. I don't know how to speak Icelandic, but for the sake of the poem and because I love the language when I hear it, I try to pronounce the words at the end. Two landscapes with women. For Daphne Caruana Galizia, assassinated 16th October 2017. Olafsfjordur. Ice cracks beneath my boots, fails to blot out the memory of a woman blasted. Burnt pieces of what she used to be, assembled for the autopsy. From her blog. There are crooks everywhere you look now. The situation is desperate. 2. Furs in mutiny against the snow. The cliff-edged, ridged with steel blue. Outstretched hooves, rigor mortis. is the carcass of a sheep still woolly, herbivorous cavity exposed. Cavity, a hollow place, empty space in the body, 1540s, from Middle French, cavité, from late Latin, cavitatum, hollowness, from Latin, cavus, hollow. 3. I skate to ravens cawing on each aerial. Their beaks must reek of fish gut. The crystal lake conceals, brings salt and herring, then takes away. They say, to know all things, kill a raven, cut out its heart, keep it under the tongue. Corvus corax, fuglamal, vili matur skilia fuglamal, madrepa grafa kera ur, honum hiatad, egema, immuniser undir tungni. And I'd like to read another text about Daphne. This time it's the first in a collection of Blackout erasures called We Are Daphne on page 94. So I was thinking of using a vehicle from antiquity in order to write about violation, because of course the original story of Daphne was one where a god, Apollo, was pursuing her because he believed he fell in love with her. In fact, he wanted to rape her and she begged to be transformed into a tree. So I thought I would look at the text very closely and see whether the archaeology of the language, as Isabel O'Hare would call it, would allow me to find some other meaning in it, perhaps to illuminate and excavate a new meaning. And I think I did. To be honest with you, that very first moment of erasure gave me goosebumps. It was almost scary how everything had already been written, right? Despite the distance in time and space, and also the difference between fiction and what was actually happening in Malta. So people have asked me why they are blackout erasures, and they also have a satirical intent. It's because there was a secret offshore company called 17 Black, and it's the one that the person who commissioned the murder of Daphne was using. So I'll just read the very first one. It's from Echo and Narcissus, from the myth of Echo and Narcissus. I took them from prose translations by Mary M. Innes, reproduced here by kind permission of Penguin Random House. As you know, the story of Echo and Narcissus is also a story about silencing, right? Echo falls madly in love with Narcissus, who's too much in love with himself to care about her, so she just disintegrates, becomes a voice. So running commentary. Daphne Caruana Galicia's notebook, from Metamorphosis, Book 3, Echo and Narcissus. That talkative nymph who cannot stay silent always answers back. Still a body then, not just a voice. She was always chattering, her power of speech to repeat the many phrases she heard, knowing well what she did. Endless the powers of that tongue. She followed secretly. The more closely she followed, the nearer the fire which scorched her. Here, come. Words echoed back. Anxious thoughts kept her awake, till finally her voice alone remained. Her bones, they say, were turned to stone, heard by all. Her voice still lives. Just wanted to show you what they look like on the page. And I'll conclude with the very last poem. It's called Daphne, 5 Ways in Which to Burn, but this one doesn't refer to any particular Daphne. I'd like it to be dedicated to anybody any woman perhaps who wants to open up to change in her life. And therefore, opening up to change, I suppose, means also opening up to resistance, to the possibility of recreation and reimagining. Definitely. 5 ways in which to burn. For lust. How's a woman ever ready? These limbs which root me to the ground when I would, for glory, bind fast each branch, steal, kneel, beseech. This is no wreath. Augustus, old fool, ask the sacred reef, ask Pliny the Elder, yes, ask Plithia. Who's the woman who set the sea on fire? For truth, she said, bear no incense for the gods. When have they ever loved you back? Yes, send back those liars, the poets. My heart has spoken thus. What of words? What of asphodel scavenged by moonlight? I'd have vouched our pink lids were a warning. For speech, what if each leaf were borrowed from human flesh, trunk as womb, as lightning bolt, as jagged signal? What does the tree already know? Old fool, has exile ever sealed the story? For spells, laurel forests, slow to leaf, slow to live. What burns but does not die? Thank you so much for listening to me.
Abigail, that was just incredibly powerful. The way that you bring women's stories into the world and you hold us accountable and hold us together with your words.
Thank you, Amanda.
So now, everyone take a deep breath. That was amazing. I'd like to open it up. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat. I have a couple here already. So if you want to ask Abigail anything about her poetry, her writing process, we have a few minutes to chat before we end today's meeting. So I'll go ahead and start with a question that came to me, which was about the landscapes. How do you place, how does place and geography shape your poetry? Do you find that your poems feel different depending upon where you write them?
Yes, I do think so. A funny thing about me, I have a hopeless sense of direction, but really hopeless. And I think that's because when I'm experiencing place for the first time, I might experience it a little bit differently than other people. I'm kind of testing it out emotionally, the effect it has on my body. I feel it very intensely, and I think I do let the landscape inhabit me. And different landscapes do produce different poems. Sometimes there's differences in versification, but also intensity and tone. I think that tone is the most revealing. Like with the Atacama poems, I feel they are more passionate than the rest because that landscape is so old. I mean, you can find bacteria there, the same type of bacteria that were the first life forms on Earth. So you can just imagine all the energies, right? So yes, that's it. It's an interesting question. I'll need to think more about it also. Part of the process.
Okay, we have another question here from Marianne. She wants to know, clearly you experience landscape emotionally. Some landscapes evoke anger, some sadness. Your island, Malta, what emotions does it evoke in you?
Thank you, Marianne, and happy to see you here. Malta for me is the sea and the coastline. I am so closely attached to it that I think without it I would not be Abigail, right? So I've written about it, I keep writing about it, but it's never enough. And I suppose what the sea tells me depends on the phase that Malta is going through. Right now, I don't feel it is in a good place, I'm afraid.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, somebody responded to that. Yes, so it depends. I mean, the sea is inseparable from its people and the people who have traveled across it. And of course, the sea brings in many migrants and a lot of death. In fact, there is a poem about death in this book. It's not only about beauty and blueness. And I try to be true to it by avoiding what I used to do when I was a younger writer. I think, you just see the colors and the vibrancy of it, but there's much more. So now I think I try to dig a little bit deeper. It doesn't mean that I manage successfully, but I do try. Even when I was talking about the island in Panama, Armila, it wasn't ideal at all. I noticed the amount of rubbish that was washed on its shores from the mainland, but also because of the natives. So there's a lot of tension, and I think as I mature, I try to represent that more fully, more truly, because I truly believe that ambiguity and contradiction and nuance are necessary in today's world, also as a political statement. This is a world where people are trying to flatten reality so that we can live with these very dangerous dichotomies. And, I stop there because I think you understand me.
Mhm. Absolutely. Tamar says, Abby, I'm interested, and I hope I'm saying the name right, Tamar. Abby, I'm interested in the various visual forms in the book, the redactions, but also the rodetes and the poems which are fragmented across the page. Can you say something about what you think they add to the book? And she also says, congratulations.
Thank you, Tammy. And Tamar Yoselov is a great teacher. I've learned a lot from her about ekphrastic poetry and art. So I wouldn't be writing this book without her, of course. Tammy, it depends on the moment. You do remember that time I wrote the poem about the Dama de Elche. If anybody could tell me the page number, yeah, I'll show it for those people who are not here. Can you see it? So I was writing about the Dama de El Shader, which was an archaeological find, and she had these beautiful shells around her head, right? They were used for rituals. They don't know exactly how they worked, but this is what I was trying to reproduce there. But the poem itself is like a ritual also in this case. Um, the blackout erasures in the case of Daphne, that goes with violation, it goes with protest, but it goes also with digging deep into the text. There are many others. What was the other one mentioned, Amanda? The other shapes.
She says the redactions, the rodetes, and the poems fragmented across the page.
Yes. So, for example, there's one I wrote called Bush Diary. Um, in fact, it's written horizontally across the page. Um, This was a very special poem for me. I wrote it when I visited the Walamai National Park in Australia, because sometimes you have the sensation that you're intruding on other people's territory. And of course, you ask yourself whether you can speak about others, not for them, but whether you have the right to speak for them, about them, excuse me. So I try this kind of layering. I'm interested in what Bakhtin says about a plurality of discourses, and I try to just juxtapose them against each other in order to be as truthful as possible. So, for example, here the text on the left and the right was taken from journals about white men trespassing on the land of Aborigines and expecting the landscape to fit their desires, when of course it would not, right? And then I juxtapose it to my own perspective of the land in the here and now. And I think by doing so, I also want to show the limitations of each point of view. right? But I also want the reader to engage with the text. In the last poem I read, for example, there is much more white space than black type. In fact, there is one page where there's only one line. And that's where I want to bring the reader in. And, you know, sometimes as a writer, you have to just shove yourself out of the way, like get out of the way, let the poem speak. Sometimes the poem needs space and pauses. I talked about music also. You need a lot of pause. There is no music without pause, without silence.
I feel like I need to let that sit now. um, I love your answers. I wish we could do a whole just hour of Q&A. We have 2 questions left and then we'll go ahead and wrap it up. So Kate says, Brava, Abby, I especially love your images. They are precise yet sheer, as if a lens bringing us closer, just gorgeous. I wonder if you might be willing to talk about when you know you're done writing a poem.
Hi, Kate, all the way from New Zealand. Kate and I have been friends for a very long time, since I'm living in Lancaster, actually. So, Kate, it's always difficult, and I find I always need outside feedback from people who are very experienced writing poetry and who know more about it than me. Of course, once you do your PhD, you tell yourself you have to rely on yourself more. And it's true that you develop some techniques when you read it out loud to yourself, especially. That's the test, and you have to let some time pass, right? You only discover that bits of the poem are not working when you let them sit and you reread it, and then you kind of grimace and you say, "Oh, really? That's bad. Did I think that was good?" But I always need the input of other people, and they really help and support me. I hope that answered your question, Kate. It's lovely to see you.
And our last question comes from Phil. He says, I'd like to ask about otherness and magic. Animals, nature, people, they appear almost as icons, glimpses of radiance and loss. And your prosody and metrics are so nuanced and powerful. I think of your lines as calling otherness into being. Could you talk a little about the way your poetry acts as a means of coping, engaging, and transcendence?
Coping, engaging in transcendence. Thank you, Phil. That's beautifully put, actually, and I'd like it to be written down for me to reflect on it. I've thought about this, and sometimes I think that transcendence is very individual, but perhaps it also has to do with our makeup. In terms of our past, sometimes our gender also. I've noticed, for example, when I was doing research, that female poets tend to talk about place differently, perhaps to open it up more to questions, and there is less of a need perhaps to appropriate it. I know this sounds like a sweeping generalization perhaps, but I'm still investigating this. And I think it has to do with the sublime also, the way your body, but also your emotions and your thoughts respond to something that is beautiful and yet instills some kind of fear because it makes you feel insignificant. When it comes to me, I love feeling insignificant. I don't fear it. I remember when I was young and I used to see vast landscapes, I used to wonder why I would cry. I could not understand this. Nobody could explain it to me. Of course, I was very young. And now I know what it is. And perhaps it's what I keep trying to reproduce all the time. How to transcend that moment and go beyond your body in order to feel intensely what it is like to be human at this point in time. it's not a project I'll ever be able to complete. It's something that I always work on. It's difficult to talk about it because I see it as a spiritual phenomenon, and it also has to do with, you know, sometimes you write something and you tell yourself, this is not completely me. There's something else in between me and the poem. Something had happened and it's beyond me. I don't want to sound too mystical, but I'm not scared of being spiritual and of using the word spiritual, because that's how I feel in relation to poetry. I said at the beginning that poetry is an exercise in compassion, and perhaps that's what we need right now. I don't know whether I have answered you, Philip. There's so many layers to your question. I'm sure I'll need to think more about it.
Thank you, Abby. I think you're right. We definitely need compassion right now. And your words bring a woman's voice into the world with this soft fierceness. And I think it is so necessary in this world right now. So I'm just thrilled that you sent your manuscript to Etruscan, and that we had the honor of reading it and falling in love with it and bringing it into the world. So thank you.
Thank you very much to everybody at Etruscan. It's been a long journey. I've been corresponding for over a year and a half now, right? But I'm very happy. And yeah, I encourage you to support Etruscan Press. I know Amanda has put up a few links, right?
Yeah, and yeah, and Elizabeth is putting them back in the chat. So if you would like to donate to Etruscan, or if you haven't gotten a copy of Leaves Borrowed from Human Flesh, both of those links are in the chat. And anything else, Abigail, before we wrap up?
I just would like to thank everybody, and I'm just trying to remember everyone so that I can take them individually tomorrow. It's lovely to see all of you. Really, really, really lovely. I've enjoyed it. I hope you have enjoyed it too.
Yes.
Thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Abby.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. I'm very grateful. It was lovely. And thank you again to Pamela, to Amanda, and to Phil, and to everybody at Etruscan who I haven't named.
Right. Thank you, Abigail, and thank you everyone for coming out. And this recording will be made available on our YouTube page, so you can come back and rewatch anytime. All right. Have a great day.
Thank you.